Welcome to everyone. Without knowing your backgrounds, I'm just going to assume that you know some Excel. Maybe some of you are ringers and you know a lot of Excel. And maybe some of you have 365. This is a very impressive set of new features that was added to Excel. And the ones that I have listed here are only available in 365. They're not available in 2019 or any of the earlier versions of Excel. So in order to take advantage of these, you need 365 by whatever means you're able to get a hold of it. Microsoft has decided that they like to lease these products on a monthly basis with an annual commitment for businesses. So you may be put into that situation. And if your company is concerned about whether or not they want to lease it on an annual basis, these new features may do well to convince you that it's probably worth the money. So in an hour, it's very difficult to really do justice to all 8 of these. So I'm going to kind of unfortunately go as quickly as I can to highlight all of them if possible, but at least the major ones that I think are really significant and have a big impact on your business. But before I jump into that, let's talk about what dynamic arrays really are, okay? And dynamic arrays take you a level beyond what you currently can do in Excel. And so the way to illustrate that is to use a very simple example. If you have a youngster, or you are a youngster, and you would like to create a simple multiplication table. If you're old, you might remember those old notebooks that had the multiplication table on the back of them. And it kind of looked like the one at the top. So if I wanted to multiply, I'm going to get my pen out here. If I wanted to multiply 2 times 5, you can see that the answer is a 10. Okay. And if I wanted to do that in a spreadsheet, I could write the numbers 1 through 10 down the B column, starting in B3, and then I could write the same numbers across the second row, starting in the C column. And then in C3, I could write a formula which says to multiply what is in B3 by what is in C2. And hopefully you have enough Excel experience that you know why the dollar signs are there, so that when I fill the formula using the fill handle, which is right at the bottom right-hand corner of the C3 cell, it will not change the B column references, but it will change the rows. It will change the C column references, but it won't change the rows. And so you would end up with this formula being populated throughout. And if you look at the one I just selected in F7, that is B7, which is a 5, times F2, which is a 4, and the product is 20. So you could do that. And before dynamic arrays, you had to fill in the formula in one cell and then drag it across and then drag it down. If you learned about array functions, you could have done it yet another way. You could have selected the entire table you wanted to populate, and then in this cell, after you had it selected, you would be able to type in the formula as I have written right here, or as you can see right here, and it's B21 through and including B30 multiplied by C20 through and including L20, and it is resolved by using an array formula, which is holding down with your fingers, Control, Shift, Enter. And that would populate this table. So you have to realize the laborious task in that process. You have to select the whole thing, type in the formula at the upper corner while it's been selected, and then do Control, Shift, Enter, kind of a 3-finger deal, and you would get the formula. Well, that is not the requirement when you have dynamic arrays. All you have to do with dynamic arrays in cell C39 is type in equals B39, so I get the 1, through B48, multiplied by C38 through L38. It is one formula, and in one shot, everything is completely filled in. And I will show you that by deleting it and then retyping it. So what I'm interested in that cell is this information multiplied by this information and enter, and the whole table is populated because of dynamic arrays. It's absolutely incredible. Okay, the whole thing gets populated. Also, it's possible that when you see that it has spilled, so what has happened is this formula was only placed in the C39 cell, and it spills the results all over the table. If you look at another cell, let's say this one, you'll notice that it's the same formula, but it's grayed out a little bit. That is your way of knowing that it has spilled the formula and it's not a different formula in that cell. And if you have good eyesight, you'll also notice that when you have selected something in the spilled range, that there is a slight, very, very slight shadowing effect that's placed on the edges of the spill range down here. And so if you look carefully, you might see that shadowing effect once I've selected the cell. Okay. Here's another interesting thing that happens to the spill range. Notice that my formula in this cell is the range multiplied by a range. So it's the B column multiplied by the C, or the B1 through 10 rows multiplied by the 1 through 10 columns in C through L. Suppose, just for kicks, you wanted to add 10 to everything in the table. The formula, if I place it in the O39 cell, might be add 10 to C39. And so that just sort of adds 10 to 1, and you get a 12. I'm sorry, an 11. And if I drag this all over the place, I could then add 10 to all of them. But because of dynamic arrays, all I have to do, instead of adding 10 to C39, is tell Excel that C39 was the result of a formula that spills. And how I tell it that is to put a hash symbol after the 39. So if I now do that and touch the enter key, like magic, all of the table has had a 10 added to each of the cells. So the new symbol, the hash symbol, tells Excel that the formula was originally based on a spill result, and it should now do it again. And there's the result. So that kind of shows you the power of what happens. So, you know, unless you are a little kid or have little kids, a multiplication table was not really a practical example. But let's take a look at one where you might have sales figures in various amounts, $100, $200, $300, and so on. And your company is paying a commission and you're evaluating the commission plan. You're looking at a 3%, a 5%, and a 7%. And what you'd like to know is, what is the effect of applying those commissions in row 62 against the various sales amounts in column C, beginning in row 63? Well, because of dynamic arrays, I can simply type C63 colon C68 to select the sales amounts, multiplied by the 3 commission rates, which are in D62 through F62, and the entire table is populated. If I wanted to know what would be the commission, well, then what I want to do is to take the values in H63 to H68. Those are my sale dollars. And I want to multiply them by the percentages. And then I want to add back in the actual amounts. And now I have the actual dollar amounts. Another thing that is nice about dynamic arrays is that suppose that you had names that I have in the C column starting in row 75. And suppose they came in from some other application. They might have been the names of people, they might have been the names of products, maybe you got them in Excel from QuickBooks or Fishbowl or whatever. And some of them have spaces in them. Some of them have a lot of spaces. Some of them have spaces in the beginning, some have spaces in the end. Well, we'd like to clean it up. So in order to clean it up, what I'd like to do is to be able to get rid of those spaces. And there is an old existing function in Excel that's called trim. And the old way would be to apply it to my name and trim it. And what it will do is remove the extraneous blanks. And if I then fill it down, I could apply it to Jones, and you see they are removed from the beginning. Here they're removed from the end, and here they're removed from the beginning. But the new way with dynamic arrays, and notice when I selected C75, the entire spill range was selected. And the new way to do this is to just simply say, trim everything from C75 to C78, and in one shot, it spills the answers down the column. Another thing that's nice is that sometimes you may bring data in that has the year and the person, and for some reason you would like it the other way. You would like the rows to be the columns and the columns to be the rows. So you would like to transpose it. Well, with dynamic arrays, you can transpose it in one fell swoop. You can transpose from C80, which starts with the year, through D85, which ends in the person cell, and in one shot, it spills and transposes everything. It's quite amazing. There are a couple of other functions that I'll talk about in a minute, but I'll show you how they work. And it's almost going to be obvious that I probably don't even have to go to those tabs and show you. But there are some other features I'll show you about. Let's suppose that you brought in customer names, and the customer for your business, I didn't mean to go that far, was Whole Foods and Safeway. Oh, and Safeway and Whole Foods and so on. And what you'd like to do is know what are your unique customer names. Well, one of the new functions is called unique. And in this cell, and as you can see, the spill range has been outlined. I wrote equals unique and define the unique names from C91 to C105. And it immediately fills them and spills the answer down the screen. The sort function does what you would expect from its name. It sorts the data. I could sort the data that's in the customer names in column C beginning in row 91. But what I'd like to do is to sort the unique names. And notice that the formula that is in E91 was the result of spilling. And so in this cell, in H91, I would like to sort what is in the spill range, the dynamic array in E91. So I write E91 hashtag. Or as I mentioned below, I could have done it all in one shot. I could have done equals sort and then in parens unique, and the range is C91 to C105, and it finds the unique ones, sorts them, and plops them right into the J column. So more on that in a minute. Okay. One of the really, really powerful new features is one called filter. Let's suppose that you have sales reps, their sales figures, and they span different territories in the north, south, east, and west. And what you would like to know is who is in the east and what were their respective sales figures. So I'm going to use a feature in this cell that will spill. And notice if your eyes are good, you can see that there's a little shading around that box to show you that it's a spill feature. And the filter has a syntax which starts with, what array do you want to filter? Well, what I'd like to filter is B5 through and including D15, all of my data on the left. And how do I want to filter it? What do I want to include? Well, I want to include when the territory D5 to 15 is the east territory. And the last option is, what do you do if it's empty? Well, if it's empty, I want to put NA in there, or you could put not found, or whatever you'd like. And it's an option. You don't have to use that if you don't want to. And so when I do that in the F5 cell, it is a dynamic array function. It automatically filters it and spills it down to show me the people in the east. And notice how dynamic it is. I could come up here and change east to south, and I get the people in the south. Or I could go back into this formula and take the south and make it north, and I get the two people that are in the north. Another nice feature about it is that I could make a compound function out of the filter. I'm still going to filter my original block of data. So I'm filtering the people, their sales, and their territory. Okay? Their people, the sales, and their territory. But now what I'm going to do is to say, I would like to know when these people are in the east and which ones in the east had sales greater than $350. So the combined formula is going to be filter my data, but then I have a compound calculation. I want to know when D5 through D15 is equal to east, and I want to know when the C5 to C15 is bigger than 350 combined. And the AND combination is done with a product. So this is east and bigger than 350. Okay. I didn't put borders around the data here, but it's basically the same idea, except what now I've done is that I want to see the people in the east and the north who have more than $350 worth of sales. So I'll take east or north and bigger than 350. So now I have three options. Okay? You saw that AND is done with a product or is done with a sum. And so this formula says, take this portion, which is an or, and add them together. It's the D column is east or the D column is north. And then this one says, and the sales are greater than 350. And then in, once again, one shot, it is spilled over into the dynamic spill range. So an AND condition is multiply and an OR condition is adding. Okay, here's another interesting thing to do with filtering. In this case, I've decided I'm going to give my user the option of specifying which office and the option of specifying what minimum sales. And I have my data sitting over here. So what I'd like to do initially is say, well, I'd like to look at anybody in California that has sales over $1,100. So this is my filter dynamic array formula. So it's filter the data in B39 to D47. That's my block of information. And how do I apply my filter? By seeing where in the C column it's equal to G38. Well, G38 is California. And multiply where in the D column it's greater than or equal to what is in G39, which is my $1,100. And bingo, I get the result immediately spilled. I wonder if I have any people in California that sold more than 2,000. Done, immediately filters it. How about people that sold more than 900 in California? Are there 3 people that sold more than 900? So it's dynamic. It immediately adjusts the spill factor. If I would like to look at another location, I can change this to New York. And these are the people in New York that were over 900. Okay. Now here's a tricky one. The formula here is a double filter. I'm going to filter the filter. And this is really tricky. This is one that you'll have to look at a few times. Notice in the first example on the left, I was retrieving all of this information, the rep, the office, and the sales. But if I'm going to specify the office, why do I need to show it? I know from my G38 cell that I'm looking at New York, so I don't really need to show it. So over here, the first part of the filter, which I'm going to highlight right here, would give me exactly what's on the left. All 3 of those people, the rep, the office, and the sales. But now I'm going to take that information and I'm going to filter it using this style, which is a brace surrounding the Boolean values, the ones and zeros, which tells the filter function which fields or columns to use, that's a 1, and which ones not to use, that's a 0. So it says use the rep, don't use the office, but use the sales. And I only get those 2 columns. Little tricky. It's one you would have to study a little bit to see how that might apply to what you're doing. Now I have a few other examples of using a filter with massive amounts of data, okay? Here's a massive amount of data that I pulled off a website which has countries, a particular product, and you can see all the headings across the top in row 1. But now I'm going to make it user-friendly. My user wants to know, well, if I look at only Germany, and I look at the product that has this name, and I want to see the gross sales of 300,000 or more. And I want to see the units sold, the manufacturing price, what the sale price was, and what the gross dollars were. So look at my formula for the filter and how it spills. So what I would like to do is I would like to look at columns E to H, and notice I haven't specified rows, so I want all of the rows. Okay? I want all of the rows, E to H. So I'll get my pen out here again. I'm looking at E to H. And what am I doing when I filter it? Well, I want to know that if in the B column, the country is Germany. So this is Germany. And multiply when in the C column, the product is SEO, and another and in the H column, when the gross sales are greater than or equal to what is in this cell, 300,000. Well, that's a lot of mess up there with the blue. So let's get that out of the way. And so in one shot, there is Germany's product over 300,000, showing me all 4 of those different columns. Mind-blowing. I could change my mind, and maybe I'd like to see the same product in Mexico, and the dynamic array completely adjusts my spill to show me that product in Mexico. Here's another interesting use. Here's some employee data. Suppose I'm in human resources, and what I'd like to know is what is the employee's ID, what is their gender, if they are making greater than or equal to, my user will decide, $75,000. So here is, actually it's right here. Here is my filter. It's a double filter. So if you look at the inside filter, I'm filtering from columns A through column E. That's ID, gender, date of birth, job category, and salary. I'm filtering it when the salary in the E column is bigger than, in this case, $75,000. But I don't want to see the date of birth. I don't want to see their job category. If I did, I wouldn't put in the front filter, but I don't want to see those. What I want to see is just the first thing, which is ID, the second thing, which is gender. I don't want to see date of birth. I don't want to see job category. So there are 2 zeros inside the braces. And I do want to see their salary. I'll show you one more that you can download. This was actually a real customer of mine several years ago who had an incredibly impressive wine cellar. And the Excel spreadsheet built the following things. We needed to know the size of the wine bottle, whether it was 1.5 liters, 750 milliliters, was it a magnum, and so on. So he had a secretary enter the unit of measure, then how many of those did he have, the quantity on hand. So if you look at the first one, he had 6 1.5 liters bottles of this Chateau Ausson. He classified it as a Bordeaux blend. It was a Saint Emilion region, and they were 1982. Well, as you can see from the database, he also had a case of the same wine, but 750 milliliters, kind of a regular bottle, and they were also 1982. Well, to sort this, back when I did this for this customer, it was really a labor of love. He should have paid me in wine, but he paid me in dollars. But now, using 365, it is really amazingly easy. So here's a case where what I wanted to do was to sort it after it was filtered. And because the data was in a table, the table was called wines. So if I walk through this, you can probably see what's happening as I refer to the table called wines. Well, I want to filter the table called wines. And I want to filter it when P2, which is Margot, was the region. And when Q1, which is the year, was greater than the vintage year, and at the same time was less than this year, 1980. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm filtering it to find out when the region was the Margot region and when the vintage was smaller than 1990 and bigger than 1980. And immediately you see that the whole thing just dropped into place. Let's suppose I wanted to know when the region was, there are an awful lot of those, so maybe I'll just select Saint-Emilion. Boom, and the whole thing changes. It's a nice database for you to play with if you like to look at someone's wine collection. Very, very impressive. Maybe I'd like to look at only the 1900s. Okay, so this group was just dated 1900. Oh, I don't want that. I meant 1990. These are only the 19. Well, there are only 4 of them in 1990. But then you'll also notice that the first thing I did over here was to then sort it. And the sort was to sort everything that was filtered based on the 6th column, which was the vintage. So if I go back to 1980, you'll notice that it's sorted based on the vintage, 1982, 1983, all the way up to 1990. And that is the significance of the 6. Sorry. That is the significance of the 6 in the argument of the sort range. Okay. That's one of the most powerful new functions. You can probably look at the detail of the unique tab if you download the sheet, the workbook, and the sort tab, and then the one called sort by. But the second one that I'm going to show you, because it's also amazing, is a modern version replacing VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP. VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP are probably 2 of the most frequently used Excel functions, other than just simple things like summing and averaging and so on, because they let you do a vertical lookup or a horizontal lookup. But VLOOKUP has some restrictions. VLOOKUP says, I only look in the left column within an array and then return you one of the columns from that array. Very restricted. You have to use index and match to look elsewhere and return something else. But XLOOKUP allows you to look anywhere and return anything. So here's my data. I have an employee number. I have their name, their salary, and department they work in. And what I'd like to do first is I would like to look up Frank Jones and find out what department he's in. So I want to look up this person and find out this department. The old method would be a VLOOKUP. I want to look up Frank Jones. I want to look it up from the C7 to E15 and return the third column, and the false means it's not sorted. The new way is to do a VLOOKUP of G7, which is his name, look it up in the C column where the names are, and return the corresponding value from E. Let's look up Frank Jones and find Frank Jones's employee number. Well, look at that. If I look up Frank Jones, the employee number is actually back a column. Using XLOOKUP, I'm going to look up G10, Frank Jones, in the C column where all the names are, but I want to return something from the B column, the one before his name. Look what you had to do before. You had to match the name in the C column exactly, and then you had to look up that name and index the B column and find out where it was. And because it returns trues and falses, you had to multiply it by 1 to get the answer, which was 010, 010. Then we could do another step. Let's find Frank Jones, and let's find him in the C column, of course, and let's return his employee number, but let's also find out what his salary is. So there's his salary. It's returning the D column. So the syntax for XLOOKUP I've written here. It is what you're trying to look up, comma, where you're looking for that thing, what you want to return. Then the option is, what do you do if it's not found? Maybe you want to say it's not found, person doesn't exist, not an employee or whatever. And then there are two other fancy things you can do. You can do things that are called the match mode and the search mode. And these things allow you to use smallest to largest, largest to smallest. You can use things called wildcards. Quite amazing. Let's take another look. Here are some people. Here are their sales. And here is their commission. But the question is, what is their commission? Well, this is how the commission is applied in my company. If you make $10,000 in sales, you get a 4% commission. Oh, I forgot. If you make 5, you get 2%. Oh, and then if you make 25, you get 7. And if you make 50,000, you get 10. And if you make 100, you get 12. And what happens is you get everything in the brackets. So if we look at this person right here, Scott, let's suppose that Scott, instead of having 48,000 in sales, he had 6,000 in sales. What's his commission rate? It's 2%, because 5,000 is the low end for 2%, and the high end is 10,000 to get him to 4%. So if he has sales of 6,000, his commission rate is 2%. And here is how it's calculated. The commission is look up B2, which is Scott's sales, look it up in the E column, which are the amounts of the sales, and return the F column. The 0 says What to do if it's not found? I'll put a 0 there. And the -1 says that is the match mode. And that says, get me the match that's exactly 6,000 or the next smallest, which is 5,000. And then multiply that by his sales in B2. Okay, that's a lot to digest. So what it says is, look up what's in B2. Look up this sales figure. That's B2. Where do we look for it? We look for it here. And what do we return when we find the 6,000 or immediately less than 6, which of course is 5? We return this value. And then when we do, it is multiplied by the 6,000 to give me that amount of pay. I can't tell, Stephanie, if someone actually asked a question. Do you see a question was asked?
Yes, actually, I was going to find out when I should ask that to you. So,
Good.
John Redfield.
Tell me to be quiet.
No, I don't want to interrupt. But John Redfield did ask one question earlier when I think we're going over the wine example.
Sure.
Does the sort function in the filter have ascending or descending options? And I think he said, so we can sort on sale descending.
Yes.
Sales descending. Okay.
Yes. So if we were to go back to, if I go to the sort tab, okay, which I didn't define, and notice that the sort syntax is, what am I sorting? What am I using to do the sort? Which in the array, it defaults to a 1 if you don't put it there. And then the third option is whether it's ascending a 1 or descending, which is -1, which is the default. It is in descending order. And so if I look at my sort over here, I have students, I have their score, or again, it could be employees and I have their sales. I could put them in alphabetical order, and this is a spill function. So what it did was it sorted B3 through C11, and I put them in ascending order. So it increased their names alphabetically. If I wanted to see their grades, I could sort the data, and I could sort the second column, and by default, it puts them low to high. Okay, so that 2 means the second column. So then, John, for you, if I said sort the people again, base it on the second column, but sort it in descending order, because the default is ascending order, I could put a -1 there, right here, and now you can see that I have them in descending order of their grades, high to low, or it could be descending order of their sales, most sales to lowest sales. So you could apply, maybe a bonus for someone if they're not on commission. Well, thank you for putting up with me for the hour. And as I said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me an email or give me a call.
Thank you very much for viewing this video. And we at Terabyte Solutions are a full-service Fishbowl support firm. So we would like to help you with your Fishbowl issues. Give us a ring at 949-645-1019, and we will be happy to help. Thank you very much. Bye.